Hey everybody. So I want to talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins a little bit here because something is very, very different about this Penguins team. Something's very, very wrong about this Penguins team. So Pittsburgh last night played Chicago, and Chicago's one of the absolute worst teams in the league, and Pittsburgh lost 6-3. Um, it dropped their record on the season down to 13-11-6. 32 points. They are tied with the New York Islanders points wise, but the Islanders have more wins, so they take the third spot in the Metro, while Pittsburgh is currently out of a playoff spot. And last night's game, just this, I was going to talk about how Pittsburgh, I thought, was turning their season around a little bit and looking to make a push, and then they go and lose to Chicago. 6-3. They gave up 6 goals to Chicago. Chicago is awful this year. Down is right with LA as one of the two worst teams in the Western Conference. And I just don't get this Penguins team. This is not the same kind of Penguins team that we've seen over the last 10 to 15 years when Pittsburgh is consistently one of the best teams in the league. Something is very, very wrong with this team. And I don't know what it is, but it's very obvious. Pittsburgh, a typical Penguins team over the past few, decade or so, even if they start the season poorly like this year's team has, does not lose that game last night. They do not lose to a team as bad as Chicago. They find a way to win, whether Crosby takes over or Malkin takes over or they just gut out a win. A typical Pittsburgh Penguins team wins that game last night. No matter what, they find a way to win. And this year's team does not have that find a way to win it factor. They just don't. There's something so different about it. They don't find a way to win. I really cannot believe that Pittsburgh lost that game last night. They had a chance to pull into a playoff spot if they won that game. Now, it's not like the last game of the season. I don't think Pittsburgh knew or were getting updates on whether or not the Islanders won or lost. If it was the last game of the season and it was a win and you're in type situation, or if the Islanders lose and you win, you get into the playoffs, they're probably getting updates on whether or not the Islanders are winning or losing. However, at this point in the season, it's not really about being in a playoff spot or not. It's about just getting points, winning games, beating teams that you should beat. And Pittsburgh definitely knew going into that game that, hey, we have 32 points. The Islanders have 32 points. If we win tonight and the Islanders lose, we move into that playoff spot, into that third spot in the Metropolitan Division. And they definitely knew that going into the game. This is a big game, and I know it's hard. It's a cross-conference game. It's not against a rival or anything. It's against one of the worst teams in the league. Sometimes those games are a little bit harder to get up for. But you have a chance to pull into playoff position. And sure, it's only December, and whether or not you're in the playoffs or not isn't a huge deal right now. But this is a game that is important. And this is a game that it's a big game for you guys. And is a game that you absolutely should win. And they lose 6-3 to Chicago. Like, what are you guys doing? What are you doing? This is not your typical Penguins team. And I'm not saying Pittsburgh's going to miss the playoffs, because when you look at the Metro standings, it's wide open. Washington is probably going to win the division. That's not a guarantee at this point, but looking at the division, looking at the way teams are playing, if you gave me $20 and said, here, you have to bet on which team wins the division, I am betting all $20 on the Washington Capitals. They're probably going to take that division. They're the best team, I think. But 2 from second place all the way down through the rest of that division is wide open. Those teams are all right on top of each other. It is anyone's for the taking. It is wide open. So I'm not saying Pittsburgh isn't going to make the playoffs, because they could finish as high as second. They could finish third. They could be a wild card team, or they could miss the playoffs entirely. I don't know with this team. I don't know. Pittsburgh might be the biggest question mark in the entire NHL as far as what kind of team are they? Where are they going to finish? What is this team? Pittsburgh, I think, is the biggest question mark in the entire league. I have no idea about this team. I have no idea where they're going to finish. I have no idea if they're going to make the playoffs or not. What I do know for sure, though, is this is not your typical Pittsburgh Penguins team. This is not the way that the Penguins have been for the last 10 to 15 years, where they've had that competitive edge. They've found ways to win games that they need to win. This team doesn't have that. This team is losing games that they should not lose, and last night was the perfect example. And really, last night was a pretty good just representation of this season for the Penguins. This team is just, something is off. Something is very, very off. Something is very, very different. This is not the Penguins that I'm used to. Because a normal Penguins team finds a way to win that game. And Crosby takes over, Malkin takes over, there's the veteran leadership wills that team to victory. And they don't have that this year. They just don't. Which is one of the biggest reasons, even if Pittsburgh does make the playoffs, I don't think they're going anywhere in the playoffs. Because they don't have that it factor this year. And I don't know what they need to do to get it back, or if this season's just going to be a bad year for them. But something's definitely not right. And if there's a very real possibility that this Penguins team doesn't make the playoffs. There's also a very real possibility that they finish second. They could easily go on a second half run, finish second in the division behind Washington, and get into the playoffs. But if they do get into the playoffs, I don't think they're going very far. They might win a round. They might lose in the first round. At best, they'd lose in the second round, I think. This team just doesn't have the it factor. Something is majorly wrong with this team. And I don't know if maybe making a deadline trade or a trade now could bring in a veteran player or something that would help them. Or I don't know if they need a coaching change. Or I don't know if maybe this season is just not going to be a typical Pittsburgh Penguins season, but something is not right. So I was just shocked to see Pittsburgh lose that game last night, because that is a game that a normal Penguins team absolutely does not lose. Not to one of the worst teams in the league. Maybe at this point the worst team in the league. I know they're not the worst points-wise. LA still is, but given the way that the teams have been playing recently, I think Chicago might be the worst. At least they're playing the worst right now. And they beat Pittsburgh 6-3. Pittsburgh gave up 6 goals. This just isn't right. So I don't know what exactly is going on, but I think Pittsburgh's in big trouble. And I was about to talk about how I thought they were turning a corner, because once Crosby came back from his injury, they had started to play a little bit better. But last night's loss, that's just disheartening. I mean, it's a really bad loss. So I don't know what's going on, but I think it's pretty clear to everyone that something is very different with this year's team. This team is not what we're used to. Something is really off. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media, check out offthewallhockey.com. All those links are down in the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, the link to our Patreon as well as the link to our merchandise store are in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry, Penguins fans, and I'll talk to you guys soon.